Welcome back to a very special episode of the Knicks Rewind podcast. We have a special guest, Mike Vorkunov, Knicks beat writer for The Athletic. Owen and I are both longtime subscribers to The Athletic, so it's a nice opportunity for us to be able to talk to one of the guys we read every day. So, Mike, thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks for subscribing. Thanks for reading. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. All right, so
it means a lot.
We will just get right into it. So there's been some recent Knicks news despite the hiatus and everything going on. So I saw a report the other day, I think it was from Begley, that the Knicks are expected to make an aggressive offer for Oladipo and that contract negotiations aren't going too well in Indiana. What have you heard and what do you think and what kind of fit do you think Oladipo could be? I mean, it's kind of a long stretch that it actually happens, but it's an interesting idea for this offseason.
You know, I don't doubt Ian's reporting. I think going after Oladipo would obviously be interesting, and it would be the type of player that they've been trying to get back in New York since they traded away Carmelo Anthony. He's a free agent after the 2021 season, so the offseason of 2021, whenever that offseason will be, whenever we play the next season and all that. I think he's going to be, I want to say, somewhere in his late 20s at that point. Yeah. So, you know, you're not getting someone who's going to be in their prime if you do trade for him. And I don't know how that would all work. He's already 28 years old. So a year from now, he's going to be 29 going on 30. I don't know how that coincides with their current timetable of the young players that they have now. But I think what's clear is that I think the timetable is going to be accelerated compared to Barrett and Mitchell Robinson, who are obviously a few years away from their prime and a few years from being in a place where they can really make the Knicks a consistent playoff team if they continue to mature and get better and all that. But it does seem, I think what the Knicks were projecting by hiring Leon Rose, by everything that they did over the last month month and a half before the season shut down, was that they want to be a place where they can eventually get a good player, a star player, an all-star level player, and that's what Oladipo was before he was injured last year. I don't know if Oladipo is the right person for that. I don't know who the person to fill that role will eventually be if the Knicks are able to pull that off. But he's an interesting idea, if the Pacers feel like they can't re-sign him and they have a year left after this season ends, whenever that happens, that's about the time you offer the extension, and it's almost like a pre-agency type of situation, and you figure out what you can do the next offseason. So I think whether Oladipo and the Pacers are able to reach an extension agreement will kind of project what's going forward.
Cool. It's also probably a bit of a risky move because of that injury he's coming off of. And, he only played a few games this year, right? And he wasn't that effective, and the Pacers weren't winning as many games. Yeah. But it's also unfair to, judge a guy coming off a season-ending injury and, coming back and
bad injury. Though.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, he only played I think 13 games. I'm just looking at it now, and obviously the production was far away from what it was, his first 2 years in Indiana when he was an All-Star both times. But I don't really think that's fair to judge where Oladipo is based on a sliver of a season since he came back from a major injury.
Yeah, but an explosive guy like Oladipo in the Garden could be pretty fun.
Well, that would also be part of the difficulty in coming to an agreement on a contract with him, right? Mm-hmm. Is because he was an all-star level player. He wasn't like one of the elite, and he did have a major injury. And by the time the contract kicks in, he'll be 29 years old. So how much do you want to pay a player like that? So, the Pacers would be taking on, I think, some risk if they were to give him a max contract, let's say. And if, in this hypothetical, if that's the road the Knicks go down, there's a level of risk to giving him a max contract at 29 and bringing him in. And especially if you have to trade for him and you give up assets to do it, that would be a somewhat risky move by the Knicks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing to look at is how much does he line up with our timeline? And I don't think he does at all. When most of your good young players, or I don't even want to say good. We don't really have many good young players, but are in their early 20s. And by the time they hit their peaks, Oladipo will be on the wrong side of 30. But it will be an interesting situation to monitor.
Yeah, sure. But that's the difficulty, right? Ideally, if you're the Knicks, you want to get someone who's already really good, like an all-star level player, and he's 25, right? The problem with that is that everyone wants those types of players, and they're probably not going to give them up if they have them. And even if someone like that does hit the market, you're going to have to give up a lot, and it might involve trading away one of those players that you want to use, as a supplement, like an RJ Barrett, like a Mitchell Robinson, right? So that becomes kind of this trade-off you're weighing and trying to figure out what to do with. And so I don't know what you do in that situation. Obviously, free agency is easier to navigate if you can just sign them off the free agent market, but the Knicks historically have not had success that way.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to Perry. Owen, you want to take this part over?
Yeah. What do you think about the Scott Perry deal? Just overall, I guess it got announced a few days ago. Do you think that it was a good move for the Knicks? Is he just more of a placeholder because of kind of all this uncertainty going on? Do you think he has a real future with the organization beyond this year?
I don't know about that. It's hard to say. I think part of it, we're going to see how well Scott Perry and Leon Rose work together for the next year. I think Leon Rose is going to see how well they work together too. Obviously, they haven't. They have a relationship that dates back something like 2 decades. I think Scott Perry was an exec in the Pistons front office when Leon represented Rip Hamilton back then. So they've known each other a while. I think really is probably a marriage of convenience and comfort. They've worked together for a while. Leon is still filling out his front office, and that's harder to do, obviously, when you're in the middle of a pandemic. And because they have known each other for a long time, and Scott Perry already has a general manager position with the Knicks, and they're on the books for 1 more year, right? It's not a 5-year contract that they picked up. That makes it easier. And I think if you're trying to figure out how the front office will work, I would guess that Brock Aller has as large a voice, if not larger, with Leon than Scott does.
That's a good transition into our next topic. So a couple weeks back, or maybe like a week back, we hired Brock Aller. And so how much influence do you think he'll have on day-to-day operations? What specifically will he have an influence on, salary or personnel? He's coming from Cleveland. So can you just explain what you think his role will be here in New York?
The way I understand it, he's kind of going to be like a right-hand man in terms of strategy for Leon Rose. His background is as a capologist, right? But that's kind of I feel like that word is kind of narrow to describe the type of job that someone does. From what I understand, in Cleveland, he was responsible for figuring out how to make deals work, how to make contracts work, how to massage the cap whenever the Cavs needed to, and they needed to a lot in those later LeBron James years. And also figuring out what deals they can do and they can pull off under the salary cap and where they can find kind of small victories on the margin. And I think he'll be doing that for Leon in New York. I think that's what he was brought in to do. I don't know if he's necessarily, and I don't even know if using these types of labels is good or smart. And so maybe I'm the idiot here, but I don't know if he's necessarily, let's say, a basketball guy. I think Scott Perry is a basketball guy, obviously, right? He has worked in the NBA for a long time. He was an assistant coach. He came up through the basketball system. And so I think Brock Aller gives a different kind of perspective. And I think that's going to be what he'll do for the Knicks and give Leon that type of viewpoint.
Cool. All right, let's move on to some of the offseason or whenever that will happen, or maybe we're already in it. I don't know. But Owen, take over here.
Yeah. So I guess one of my questions was, how do the Knicks internally view themselves going into next season? Do they see themselves as a team that is right on the cusp of being a playoff team, or do they see themselves as being a few years away? And I guess, how will they act?
I'll be honest, I don't know. We haven't heard from Leon Rose since he got hired. It's been over 2 months now, and he's a guy who keeps everything pretty close to the vest. And I'd like to guess and at least have an educated guess for you. But really, I don't know. I don't know what their timetable looks like. I don't know if they want to ramp up quickly over this offseason and try to make the playoffs next season. I don't know if they want to use next year as a bridge gap and try to really build things together in the 2021 offseason. I just don't have an answer for you. And that's going to be really interesting to see how quickly they want to get this done. I think, look, if you want to be a realist when it comes to looking at the Knicks, there's usually not a lot of leeway for coaches and for execs with the Knicks, right? Name me the coach who's had 2 rebuilding years and then stuck around and had 3 more and been there for 5-6 years and got to see his project go through. That hasn't happened. And all these people probably understand where they're working and the history of the people and their jobs. I don't know what Leon intends to do, but I'd guess that Leon is a pragmatist and he understands the nature of the job that he has and just what job security is. And obviously he sold something. He gave James Dolan a plan when he took over the job. We'll see what it.
I guess I have another question. It's kind of related to what you're talking about. What's it like being a beat reporter for probably the weirdest, PR team office in the entire NBA? Like, how is it? Is it hard sometimes to like get quotes or because nobody ever talks and they just put out these like random statements
on Twitter
all the time?
It's an interesting job to have as your first time covering an NBA team. I didn't get to ease my way in. I didn't get to do it in a market that's out of the limelight. I didn't get to go to like Cleveland, right? And so it's been fun. It's been interesting. It's difficult, obviously. The Knicks haven't had an executive talk since November 10th, which is weird that I remember in my head the last time they had an executive talk, right? It's the types of stories that I like to do, which do involve talking to a lot of people, which do involve I wouldn't say access, but I would say just an ability to talk to people on the record for things. And I think that's the best way to get stories out, is to talk to people on the record when you can. That doesn't really happen in New York. Even, the players, when you can get them, are accessible, but, pregame, postgame is not really, I don't know. It's not the most fertile time for reporting and for talking to players. And so it is a hard job on the scale of, covering an NBA team. But I can't really complain too much because in big scheme of things, I'm covering basketball. And no matter what, that's a fun job. And I'm lucky to have it. And I shouldn't complain about what my gig is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you. And off-season chat is tough, right? Because we don't know when it's going to happen. But we'll quickly hit, some coaching stuff real quick, and then we'll go to the draft. And then we'll do like a 2019-2020 season in review where we have a few questions there. So my last upcoming off-season question is, in your articles, you've made some cases for our potential coaching candidates. Who do you think is the best fit here personally? And, I like Miller and, like Thibodeau is some. Owen, you want to mention who you like the most?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Atkinson guy. That's who I think. And do you think, I guess, I saw a couple, or the other day, that the Rockets and Nets were also expected to hire Thibodeau or go in and look at Thibodeau. So do you know anything about who the Knicks are targeting besides Thibodeau? Because that's the only name, I guess, that's really come out a lot. And how do you guys think about Miller? And I know you talked about Miller and you kind of made a case for him to come back. Do you think that's realistic at all?
I wouldn't be surprised if he's back in New York, but maybe on the staff or something like that. It's hard to handicap all this. I think the only name that we've really heard tied to the job, and this isn't directly from anyone with the Knicks though, has been Tom Thibodeau, and that's kind of more of circumstantial evidence, right? They've known each other for such a long time. They've had this long standing relationship, and Thibodeau has obviously had success in the NBA, and it wouldn't surprise me if the first coach that Leon Rose hires is someone that he does know well, right? It's not even one used to be a CAA client, one used to run CAA. It's just, there's a comfort factor that comes with any hiring decision. You hire the people you know and you're comfortable with, and who you have good relationships with, especially in times of pandemic, let's say. So Mike Miller has done a good job with the Knicks since he took over in December. It's been a hard job. He got put into a difficult position. I think he's done well with it. I think he deserves to get an interview and get a look at the job. And when I wrote the case for Mike Miller, there's a bunch of reasons, from the on-court product to the fact that he, his low-key demeanor kind of fits in New York where things get crazy and hectic. And they asked him to do a lot as essentially a spokesperson for the team, and he handled that well. I think Atkinson is obviously an interesting choice. If the Knicks want to develop young players and eventually get to a place to sign star free agents, well, that's kind of what he did in Brooklyn, right? The application is obvious, right? One team to another, same state, in the same city, and all that. So that's the use case right there. I don't know which way the Knicks will go. Obviously, I think the folly, and I've been saying this, is that the folly in only limiting it to saying that the Knicks will hire Tom Thibodeau, while that may actually be the truth and turn out that way, is that Leon Rose knows a lot of people around the league. We don't know who he knows, right? So if we're just basing it off of he's had a long-standing relationship with Coach X, and so that's the reason why he'll get a job, we don't know everyone that Leon knows. And so, Tom might be the only guy that we really know about publicly. We don't know who else is on that list for Leon. And so it may eventually be Tom, but I would just say widen the scope a little bit, probably.
I think something that's funny also is I think every single person now looks to see if a prospective free agent or prospective coach is a CA client. And everybody is a CA client. It's the most popular basketball agency. So, I mean, who knows? He's very clearly well connected.
Well, I'll say this too.
So, yeah.
Listen, I think it would be not giving Leon Rose much credit if you said he was only going to hire CAA clients, right? Sure, he used to work there, but he doesn't work there anymore. And the best thing he can do in his own self-interest, which is what he should be thinking about now, right, is hiring whoever he thinks is the best person for the job. Helping CA doesn't matter anymore for him, or shouldn't at least. So I think just kind of narrowing it to CA clients is probably a little too speculative for me or for anyone else. If Leon Rose is good at what he does, he's just going to hire whoever he thinks is the best, not necessarily who the best CA guy is.
Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, if he's only limiting it to CA guys, he's already in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
All right. This next question is a draft-related question. So it's just first question. The Knicks get the number 1 pick in the draft. Who do you take?
That's a good question. I haven't delved too deep into the draft stuff yet, but I would say probably the guys who intrigue me the most are LaMelo Ball, because he has an elite skill that seems to be really interesting, and that they don't have. They have somebody who can push in transition, someone who seems to be a really good passer, has great floor vision, and I think there's kind of amplified benefits to that than just having a guy who racks up a lot of assists when you have him as one of your best players. Anthony Edwards seems like he could be the kind of prototypical wing 2 guard in the NBA if everything goes right for him, but it seems like there's a good amount of cracks to his game. Obi Toppin is kind of interesting to me as just kind of this athletic 4 who can pair well if his jump shot gets there with Mitchell Robinson. But I'm not really sure that the Knicks, especially if they get the number 1 pick, should go a big man, considering they already have one with Robinson. And really in the league now, you need wings and you need guards. So those are kind of the 3 I'm thinking of. I think those are the most interesting ones. I think you've seen Isaac Okoro thrown out there from Auburn.
Right.
Big fan.
Sam Vecini just put out his board, his draft board, and I think he had LaMelo 1, and he had Anthony Edwards 2, and I think James Wiseman 3. That's the one guy I would be surprised to see if the Knicks took Wiseman. For
sure.
I'd agree.
Makes sense. But yeah, I don't know. If they go, if they get the number 1 pick, I would guess it. LaMelo or Anthony Edwards make the most sense there.
I think if the Knicks draft Obi Toppin at first overall, I don't think that Owen will watch a game next season.
No, I don't think
I
hate Obi Toppin. I hate Obi Toppin.
I don't know if he's the best talent, and you should go best talent when you're picking that high, and especially talent plus fit might be a little odd.
Yeah, I'm a big.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
He's also 22, which is hard, and I think he has a lot of empty stats, he just dunked a lot off alley oops, pick and roll layups. I think he benefited from being really athletically superior to the people around him. He didn't play in the strongest conference in college basketball, the Atlantic 10. Last time we talked about this, my dad went to Richmond, which is in the Atlantic 10, and I said that Richmond was glorified Division III basketball. So I take that back. But it is not the strongest conference. And I think he kind of benefited from that just because he's an incredible athlete.
Yeah, but I mean, when you're looking at this draft specifically, there's a lot of people playing, and how do you deal with LaMelo who's playing in New Zealand, which isn't like a Australia, sorry, which isn't like a top flight professional league, right?
No,
Memphis, James Weissman was in the AAC for 3 games. Dayton, obviously, Killian Hayes was playing in Germany and not even for like the best team.
That's why you go. That's why you go Anthony Edwards. That's my guy.
Yeah, but he's got his issues too.
No, he's definitely got his issues. But SEC basketball, I'm an SEC homer, so I want Anthony Edwards just personally. There's a ton of holes in his game, but I go back and forth between LaMelo and Edwards like every day.
Me too. I agree. Are the Knicks? I'm curious. Are the Knicks this offseason kind of just set on finding their point guard, whether that's like Chris Paul or through the draft? Are they high on any of the point guards on their roster? I mean, I know Perry's really high on Elfrid Payton, but other than that, yeah.
I feel like I'm gonna be a broken record, and it's gonna seem like a cop out, but I really don't know, right? Like, who's gonna be in the front office to make the pick? What scouting staff will Leon Rose lean on, right? Like, we don't know all these things yet. He has essentially announced or made it known that 2 guys are going to be big parts of his front office. We don't know who else will. And so I think that's the difficult part in projecting all this. Like the Knicks had one guy at the top of the food chain, or the two people at the top of the food chain into February, and whatever plans they were making for the draft up until that point, or whatever ideas they had about the draft at that point, had to change at the very top, right? Because someone new comes in, and someone who may have different ideas about what the roster looks like. And mentioned like Scott Perry likes Elfrid Payton, okay, but Leon Rose might not. Differing opinions could change the trajectory of what they do.
Leon Rose shouldn't like Elfrid Payton. I hope he does.
But I wouldn't be like totally surprised if Elfrid Payton comes back, because if you look at 2 things, like let's say the Knicks don't go with a point guard in the draft, and they don't want to give up assets to trade for one. If you look at the free agent market, there's not really like anyone great out there at the point guard spot. I don't know how you feel about giving Fred VanVleet, let's say like $18 million. I think there's arguments that for and against it. And so, I mean, Elfrid Payton, $8 million, 1 more year. That's not a bad thing to do. That's not a bad placeholder to have at the position.
I think go ahead, Johnny.
Since we're on the point guard talk really quickly, can you talk to me about Frank? Owen and I are huge Frank guys, and I realized that I wasn't really thinking about him when we were planning the show. Just, do you think, I know it's impossible for you to know because the media or the front office hasn't really come out and said anything, but do you think Frank is a real part of his future?
I think his next season will determine that. Mm-hmm. He's going to be a restricted free agent offseason of 2021. I think he'll be back next year. But he's got to make some more growth offensively, and I think if he impresses the current front office, then I think he could stay. But that's a decision to be made. Like, if he's he'll be 22 years old next offseason, 4 seasons in the league. If he hasn't shown much more growth offensively, I don't know what kind of salary you try to peg him to if you try to re-sign him. Mm-hmm. And if some other team makes a big offer to him, or relatively big, let's say like $8 million, something like that, I don't know. That would be a hard call to decide what to do there.
I hope we can.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm so high on Frank.
I hope we keep him. Yeah.
But anyway, we'll move on.
We'll go on. Yeah. On the topic of young players, I'd say the most important one for the future of this team is RJ Barrett. So what do you think about him? Do you think he has the chance to kind of be a cornerstone? I guess from what you've seen this year, is the team like ready to just build all around him? Yeah.
I think he's shown some promise to be a potential cornerstone. I've just lost all ability to think and speak anymore. This is what happens when you only spend time on the computer and talking to your daughter.
Not blaming you, man.
Yeah. So I think he's shown the ability to be a cornerstone type of player, to be a guy who can be like one of the 3 best players on a good team. Like, is he a definite future all-star? I don't think you can say that after his first year in the league. I think where he goes with his jump shot will really determine a lot, and just how good he can possibly be. But I do think there's promise there. Like, there's a good player there. There's an archetype for a really good player there, and it's how he works on his game and what parts he improves upon, and then also what the Knicks put around them. Like this year, it was a little bit difficult to judge him because he was just put in a bad situation. Like the roster composition wasn't optimal for his development. They didn't put shooters around him. There wasn't a lot of spacing for him. He was still able to get to the rim a lot and make tough shots and all that. But I also wonder, like, what's he look like if they put 3 shooters around them and Mitchell Robinson diving to the rim? I think if he was able to do that for a year and the type of offense that plays in that type of system, like we might have a different evaluation of his rookie year.
Owen was hard on RJ all year, so that's what I kept telling him all year. And now that we're hearing it from a writer, I think that's set in stone, Owen, that you got to give him another chance. It's only been 1 year. But anyway, that's like exactly what the next question was. Yeah. So in your article about RJ, you referenced some scouts saying he played out of position. Owen and I feel like it's obvious, but do the Knicks really notice that? And do they have any interest or presence of mind to move him from the 3 because of this year's lack of spacing?
Yeah, I think this year he was just kind of stuck where he was. Like the Knicks tried to play big very often. That's just what their roster was. They had a lot of 4s and 5s and 3s and all that type of stuff. So he almost, if he had to get minutes, it was at the nominal 2 position. Like he was on the wing, and so there's a lot of trade off there. But if you're playing alongside Marcus Morris, right, you're probably going to be playing, Marcus Morris, Julius Randle, and Taj Gibson were the starting front court. And in the NBA nowadays, that's a pretty big front court. So you're just going to be big all along, and you're just going to be a big 2 guard. I think eventually he'll be a 3. I think that's a better position for him alongside, shooters or point guard. Maybe I think one of the scouts I quoted there said they can see him eventually becoming like a small ball 4 even, because he is 6'7" and he is pretty physically imposing, especially for a rookie.
He's a big boy.
And so I could see that happening as well. Yeah, I mean, it's really, that's what I mean. Like a lot of it has to come down to roster composition, right? I don't know if he's best equipped to guard a 2 on the perimeter, right? It might be someone a little bigger and slower that really fits them. And so, that comes with trade-offs too, right? Will he be able to muscle through, someone who's like 6'8" and 220 instead of like 6'6", 205, right? And muscling to the rim was, an important part of his game and just being able to get there. So I think there's trade-offs, but I think eventually he'll be playing in the front court as a kind of a 3, maybe a small ball 4 in some lineups, and I think that'll fit him well. And he can still be, positions are kind of whatever at this point, at least in my eyes, right? It's more about what you're asked to do on on the floor for a team. Like he can still be someone who runs pick and roll and does playmaking and gets his own shot and all that type of stuff. So it's more so about the type of players that's around you than just like, is he a 2 or a 3 or a 4?
Yeah, I agree with the positions thing to a certain extent, because I guess Fizdale made me think a little differently about that, because when you throw around like Randall, Morris, and like that spacing was terrible. I think you got to kind of stick RJ into a certain box. And I guess like my next question for you, I've been super hard on RJ, and I've never really liked RJ as a prospect, in part because like when you talked about LaMelo, you talked about like he's got like a real talent, and that's like his ability to pass the ball. And I've never seen anything like that with RJ, because everyone says he gets to the rim, and he's actually the worst finisher in the NBA. Do you think he, I guess, like has a real skill like that? Is that his skill? Like what? Yeah.
I think getting to the rim is his skill. I think it's if not, it's not there quite yet, despite what numbers say, but I think eventually he'll be, one of the better players in the league at getting to the rim and just finding a shot there. He's got to improve finishing there. Like he's not an elite athlete, so I think that contributes to some of his lower shooting numbers when he gets in the paint and around the basket. But you can get better as an athlete. Not substantially better, but you can still get better and finish, figure out ways how to finish around defenders and just what to do when you get there. I think he'll continue to mature, like, as a player. I think he'll, one of the things he said, I think it was after the Knicks played in Houston, was like he's kind of interested in the way that James Harden accelerates and decelerates when he's in the paint to create room for himself and to create shots for himself. I think that's something he'll probably try to work on and figure out how to do for himself too, right? And that'll be able to create easier shots for him, get more get to the line more often, and which he did, at a pretty substantial rate for a rookie this year too. So if he can get to the line, if he can get to the rim, he's just got to be able to improve there. And, if he becomes like a 35% 3-point shooter at the very least, like that's already a better player there. And that's not necessarily like an all-star level player, but it's a pretty good player.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on to Knox really quickly, because Knox has had a tough couple of first years in the league. So you wrote the other day about like his confidence and everything. That all disappeared this season. Look at Knox's opportunities to run the pick and roll, something he'll need to eventually do for him to be a top scoring option in the wing, as the Knicks imagined upon drafting him. Like, what coach do you think would suit Knox well with, opportunities to run the pick and roll, or maybe be a ball handler, or become a potential big time scorer, even though I don't think he'll ever be a big time scorer from what I've seen. But, quickly, can you just touch on Knox and like what style of play or what coaching will suit him going into next year?
Yeah, I mean, talking to people who've watched the Knicks, and I quoted 2 scouts there, but I've heard from others, they think he's a 4. And so sure. Kind of a small ball 4, and he played, again, we're getting some positions, but like he played at the 3 and the 2 even sometimes,
right.
This year. And like, especially at the 2, that's not good for him defensively. As a 4, he can stretch the floor. Eventually, that's like the first thing he can do, right? I think just hitting him with shots in the corner and the perimeter, we can get a shot going. I think will be better for him and just help him be a contributor quicker. And then once you go from there, you work on his ball handling, see if he can run the pick and roll and create for you there at, at least like a good enough level. And I think that's how you build out his game. But first you find a position and a role that fits for him. And early on, he'll still be only 21 next year. Like, he's growing. He got bigger in the offseason. Last summer, I think he put on, I want to say 15 pounds, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. Maybe I don't know. He was more muscular. I know that.
Yeah, for sure.
So his body continues to mature, and he finds a role that works for him, and he has the jump shot. I think people thought he would be a shooter when he gets to the NBA. If he can get that going, and that's how he can contribute early on. And if you can have a guy who's like 6'8" on the perimeter and playing small ball 4, and from time to time be a good weak side shot blocker or something like that, which he showed this season, I think that would be a good starting point for him.
Yeah, Knox has like a good NBA body. He's got a good looking jumper. But because of how poor the roster construction was this year, it's hard to play him at the 4, obviously, because of all the 4s that we signed. So he was just in a tough spot this year. I think it's hard to judge his future off of this 1 year and his rookie year. So he's only like 20, 21. So I haven't given up yet.
Yeah, and I don't think you should. He's young enough where you shouldn't give up on him. You got a 4-year contract when you get him as a first round pick, right? Like, see what all 4 of those years can bring for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, and any final Knicks specific questions that you want to ask before we move on to our short final segment?
I guess I don't really have anything right now. It's a bit of a tough time for basketball news. I guess I have one. Realistically, just do you think there's any chance the NBA comes back this summer?
Yeah, I think so. If you see, like, I retweeted our Magic writer today who was saying the Magic CEO had some conference call with Business Roundtable or something in Orlando, was saying that the NBA really wants to get back this summer. It seems like they're intent on it. So, yeah, I could see a way where they have the conclusion of this 2019-20 season. I have no idea what the hell it's going to look like, but I think it could definitely happen. I think that's what the league is trying to do. There's a lot of revenue to lose if you don't. So it makes sense. If you can do it responsibly, right? That's the thing is, if you can do it responsibly, then do it. But I think right now it'd just be hard to, as of right now, it seems like it would be kind of hard to responsibly bring the league back and make it happen from, you need testing. You need a lot more testing than is available right now. You need to either put everyone in one place or,
yeah,
I don't know. I don't even know. Like, you saw Fauci. What he said is like basically you just got to put everyone in one place in a bubble scenario, right? Like, okay, sure, but you need a lot of testing. There's not a lot of testing available right now. So that's why it's hard to project. Like, I think the NBA wants to bring it back. I understand why they do. If they can do it responsibly, that's great. But it just, I think the resources aren't there for the league or any league right now to be able to play a season, any portion of their season. And a lot of that has to do with just the lack of testing in the country at the moment.
Mm-hmm. We know you got to run in a minute, so I'm going to ask you 2 quick questions, quarantine related. Best quarantine shows so far you've watched?
All right. Unorthodox was great on Netflix.
Yep, I heard about that.
I am binging Community again.
Funny show.
Which
yeah.
I loved the first time when it was on TV. And I think like it's even better now. It's amazing. You should watch Community if you haven't yet.
Yeah, I'm done with season 1. It's good.
Yeah, it just only gets better. It's really a great show. Scrubs is on Hulu.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm not like Netflix specific.
No,
Billions.
I just got Hulu. Yeah, Billions is really good.
Yeah, my dad loves Billions.
Yeah, written by a Knicks fan.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did you see Succession?
I did see Succession. I would
show.
recommend Succession if you have HBO.
Show.
Loved Succession.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm trying to think what else there is. I've been watching The Last Dance every Sunday like everyone else. It's been good. I don't think it's been like great. Breaking Bad. No, sorry, not Breaking Bad. Better Call Saul has been wonderful.
Yeah,
I just finished the 4th season on Netflix and trying to figure out where I watch season 5.
Yeah, Breaking Bad's one of my favorite shows of all time. So I just started Better Call Saul. It's a good show.
Yeah, Better Call Saul is really good. If you haven't watched Breaking Bad yet, go ahead and do that as well. I mean, like, there's so much good. Like, that's the thing. Like, this is, of all the times to be quarantined or self-isolating, there's a lot of stuff to watch at this moment in time. This would have been, I think, a lot harder in the 80s or whatever it was when you were just stuck with Cosby Show and TJF Friday stuff on ABC. So yeah, those are the shows I'm going through right now. But like, I think I write a column every week where I write about what I'm watching this week. So there's always something good. Brittany Runs a Marathon is a movie that I just watched on Amazon Prime. I liked it. There's too many good things on right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's probably been a lot of TV, but other than writing, what have you been doing to keep yourself occupied without sports? Just random things. Could be 1 or 2 things.
Honestly, like, I have been trying to maintain somewhat of a normal work schedule when I can. Not always possible. And at the end of the day, when I'm done working, I'm just trying to put my kid to sleep and then like sit in front of the television and just relax. I've tried to read, but you get so tired from work and everything else that it's hard to read sometimes. But I'm trying to make some time every day or every week at least to read a book and keep my brain working a little bit. I don't want to let it atrophy during this time.
Yeah. So my final question, or maybe Owen, you have one more after this, but with sports not happening, like, and you write almost like every day. So how do you find these things to write about? What's your brainstorming process if it's a slow news day, which many of these days have been?
Every day is a slow news day. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe some of it is just like kind of, I want to say like common sense.
Yeah.
But like, I've been doing like the season in reviews for Ntilikina and Barrett and Mitchell Robinson's going to be this week. Just stuff you do when you cover a team. I've been trying to like look back into history and see if there's anything interesting there. Like, we have Nexus, and so I can kind of look into newspaper clips from the 90s and the 80s and the 70s and the 2000s and just like dig into stuff that I find interesting and just like learn more about it. Like, I wrote about Magic Johnson apparently flirting with the Knicks in the 90s. I had no clue about that, and I bet a lot of people didn't. And it's just like that. It's like I'll see something that just sparks my attention or gets my brain going, and then I'll kind of dig into it a little bit. And it's weird. I have a bunch of stories that I'm working on right now, but because I cannot keep track and keep focused long enough, I can't quite finish all of them, which is a good problem and a bad problem to have. So like, I have no shortage of stories that I want to do and that I'm working on. I just have a shortage of stories that I've finished and published.
It's very similar to me with my homework situation for school.
Yeah.
Very hard to motivate myself.
Yeah, honestly, like, one of the things I've tried to do is try to get back into learning a little bit, and just I don't want to say like pick up a new skill. I think that's kind of the wrong way to put it, but just like keep learning new things and, try to find time when I can. Like I'm trying to, if I can, like learn programming or learn coding a little bit during all this. But it's just difficult to find the time. So in some way, I'm kind of envious that you guys are able to keep learning and you have homework. I'd love to have, some learning and homework on math or science or something like that.
I don't know about that, man. I don't know about that.
Listen, when I was in school, I loved math. I was a good math student. I liked science. So I never hated that part. I was lazy, but I never disliked learning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lazy.
That's fair.
We're both lazy.
Yeah, except when it comes to sports.
Yeah, that happens often enough. That's how a lot of people get into this industry.
Yeah. Oh, and do you have any final questions before we wrap it up?
No, I don't. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
really
guys.
appreciate it. And, the platform is yours for the next 30 or so, or whatever, how much time you need to socials. I don't know. Do your thing.
Anything.
No. Listen, thanks for having me. It was fun coming on. I hope all your listeners subscribe to The Athletic for the Knicks coverage, for everything else that we cover, which is kind of like every major professional team in North America right now, and some soccer over in England and Europe. So, subscribe to The Athletic if you haven't. We have a 90-day free trial going. So if you're not a subscriber yet, you can get in, check us out, and for a pretty good deal.
It's worth it, guys. But anyway, thank you. We really appreciate it, and we hope we can keep in touch soon, and we hope that you find things to write about. That doesn't take a lot of work.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Yeah, stay safe during all this.
Yeah,
stay inside.